Am I the a-hole for kicking an autistic child out of my restaurant for misbehaving? I never thought I'd be called a monster for asking a child to stop destroying my restaurant. But that's exactly what happened when I dared to stand up to a mother who used her son's autism as a free pass for absolute chaos. The look of pure hatred in her eyes as my husband escorted them out still haunts me, as does the question, when did setting basic boundaries become an act of discrimination? My name is Gina, and at 55, I've witnessed the service industry transform dramatically. The pizzeria my husband Tony and I opened when we were newlyweds has weathered economic downturns, changing tastes, and fierce competition. But nothing prepared us for the shift in customer behavior that followed the pandemic. It wasn't just the occasional rude comment or impatient glance. It was as if people had forgotten how to exist in shared spaces altogether. The most jarring change was parents allowing their children to treat our restaurant like their personal living room. Tablets and phones blaring cartoons, YouTube videos, and games at full volume became commonplace, turning our once peaceful dining room into a cacophony of competing sounds. The warm conversations and laughter that had always filled our space were being drowned out by the electronic babysitters parents now seemed unable to function without. After numerous complaints from other patrons, we instituted a simple policy: no speaker phone calls, no music playing out loud, and no videos or games with the volume on. We posted tasteful signs by the entrance and at each table, explaining our desire to maintain a pleasant atmosphere where people could enjoy their meals and conversations. Most customers nodded in understanding, sometimes even thanking us for maintaining one of the few quiet dining options in town. Our pizzeria isn't fancy checkered tablecloths, family photos on wood-paneled walls, and the scent of my grandmother's secret sauce recipe that still simmers in our kitchen daily. We've always welcomed families. The sound of children's excitement, and even the occasional tantrum, has been part of our soundtrack for decades. 5 booths along the windows showcase crayon art from generations of young customers. We're not asking for library silence, just basic consideration. I often think about my own 5 children, now grown with families of their own. My youngest son, Marco, was born with Down syndrome, so I understand firsthand the challenges parents of special needs children face. We never kept Marco at home, hidden away. We took him everywhere, teaching him how to navigate different environments with patience and consistent boundaries. It wasn't always easy, but it was our responsibility as parents to help him learn to exist in a world that wouldn't always accommodate his needs. That particular Tuesday afternoon, when the woman and her son walked through our door, nothing seemed unusual at first. A new customer, perhaps passing through town or recently moved to the area. The boy looked to be around 9, fidgeting but not unusually so. I greeted them with the same warm smile I offer everyone, completely unaware that the next hour would force me to draw a line. I never thought I'd have to defend a line between compassion and enabling truly disruptive behavior that no diagnosis could justify. As I handed them menus, I caught the first notes of a cartoon theme song blaring from the boy's tablet and felt a knot form in my stomach. Something told me this wouldn't be a typical service. The cartoon theme song grew louder as the woman and her son settled into the corner booth by the window. At first, I tried to ignore it, hoping she would notice our prominently displayed signs or perhaps sense the uncomfortable glances from nearby diners. But as the minutes passed, the volume seemed to increase rather than diminish, competing with the classic Italian music we play softly in the background. Even more jarring, I realized the boy was actually operating 2 devices simultaneously, watching cartoons at full blast on his tablet while also scrolling through TikTok on a smartphone, the occasional viral sound effect punctuating the already chaotic noise. The elderly couple at the next table, regulars who had been coming every Tuesday for 15 years, kept exchanging pained glances. Mr. Abernathy, recovering from a stroke and sensitive to overstimulation, was visibly wincing with each electronic shriek. I couldn't ignore the situation any longer, not when it was clearly affecting other customers' dining experience. Taking a deep breath, I approached their table with my best customer service smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," I began politely, keeping my voice warm and gentle. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we have a policy about electronic devices in our restaurant." I gestured to the framed notice on their table. "We ask that all phones and tablets be kept on silent or used with headphones to maintain a pleasant atmosphere for everyone." The woman barely looked up from her menu, her response immediate and sharp. "My son has ADHD and autism," she stated flatly, as if those words alone should end the conversation. He needs the stimulation to stay calm while we eat. It's how we manage his condition. I noticed the boy didn't look up either, his eyes fixed on the cartoon characters racing across his screen, his free hand rhythmically tapping the table edge. Having raised Marco, I understood the importance of accommodations, but I also knew the difference between necessity and convenience. I completely understand, I replied, maintaining my composure. Perhaps he could use headphones. We actually keep a few pairs behind the counter for customers who might need them. Her head snapped up then, eyes narrowing as if I'd suggested something deeply offensive. He doesn't like headphones. They bother his ears. He's sensory sensitive. Each word was delivered with increasing sharpness, daring me to challenge her further. I see, I responded, still keeping my tone measured despite the growing knot in my stomach. In that case, could we possibly set the devices to silent? The visual stimulation would still be available, just without the sound. Look, she said, lowering her menu and leaning forward. Do you have any idea how hard it is to have a meal out with a special needs child? The only way we can do this is if he has his devices exactly how he likes them. If he gets upset, believe me, you'll prefer the cartoon sounds. The threat in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt a flush of both sympathy and frustration. I genuinely believed in accommodating different needs, but this felt less like accommodation and more like abdication, a parent unwilling to work within reasonable boundaries. I understand this is challenging, I said, my resolve strengthening, but we need to be fair to all our customers. The volume is disruptive to others trying to enjoy their meals. I'm happy to help find a solution, but having the devices at full volume isn't one we can accommodate. She muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like discriminatory, but reached over and adjusted the tablet volume not off, just slightly lower. I decided to accept the small victory for now, thanking her before returning to the kitchen, though the Bluey theme song was still clearly audible throughout the dining room. As I pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen, I caught Tony's questioning glance. Just a small issue with the electronics policy, I assured him, hoping that would be the end of it. The tight feeling in my chest suggested otherwise. My relief was short-lived. Barely 10 minutes after returning to the kitchen, I heard a rhythmic banging so forceful it made the glassware on the nearby shelves tremble. The sound echoed through the restaurant, drowning out even the clatter of pots and pans. Tony and I locked eyes, both recognizing that whatever was happening in our dining room required immediate attention. As I pushed through the kitchen door, the scene that greeted me sent a surge of adrenaline through my body. The boy was no longer seated but standing beside his table, pounding both fists against the wooden surface with shocking force. His face had contorted into a mask of rage, eyes wide, mouth open in what appeared to be a silent scream. The tablet that had been the source of our earlier disagreement lay face down on the floor, its screen now dark. Most disturbing of all was the mother's reaction, or rather, her complete lack of one. She sat calmly scrolling through her own phone, acting as if her son's violent outburst was no more remarkable than a slight breeze. The other diners had frozen mid-meal, forks suspended in air, conversations abruptly halted as all eyes fixed on the escalating situation. "Excuse me," I said, hurrying over, raising my voice to be heard over the thunderous banging. "Is everything okay? What's happening?" The woman glanced up with an expression of mild annoyance, as if I were interrupting something important. "His tablet died," she explained flatly. "He's just expressing his frustration. It's normal for him." Normal? The word stuck in my throat as I watched the boy's tantrum intensify. Before I could respond, he abruptly stopped pounding the table and took off running through the restaurant, weaving between tables with alarming speed. As he ran, he swung his arms wildly, deliberately striking chairs, knocking over a salt shaker, and upending an empty water glass. A sound somewhere between a growl and a scream escaped him as he rounded the dessert display, delivering a kick so powerful to one of our antique chairs that it fell sideways with a splintering crack. "Ma'am, please," I implored, gesturing urgently toward her son who was now circling back for another lap of destruction. "You need to intervene." She barely looked up from her phone. "He's on the spectrum," she repeated, as if those words absolved her of any parental responsibility. "This is how he processes his emotions when he doesn't have his device to calm him. If you had let him keep watching his shows at the volume he needed, this wouldn't be happening." The accusation stung. She was blaming me for her child's meltdown rather than taking any responsibility herself. Around us, other customers were becoming visibly distressed. "Mr. Abernathy had covered his ears, his wife protectively placing her arm around his shoulders. A young couple with an infant had gathered their belongings and were hastily preparing to leave, the mother clutching her baby protectively to her chest. "That's enough." The voice came from across the room, not mine, but from a burly man in his 40s who had half risen from his seat. "Control your kid, or I will." The threat hung in the air like a thundercloud, immediately charging the atmosphere with dangerous tension. The boy stopped his circuit momentarily, sensing the shift in energy, while his mother's head snapped toward the man, her expression transforming from indifference to righteous indignation in an instant. "How dare you?" she shouted, standing up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "My son is autistic. He has a right to exist in public spaces just like everyone else. You have no idea the challenges we face every day, the judgment, the stares." Her voice rose to a practiced cadence, as if she'd delivered this speech many times before. Meanwhile, her son, seemingly emboldened by the escalating chaos, resumed his destructive circuit, now knocking silverware off tables and pushing against the backs of occupied chairs. I stood in the center of my beloved restaurant, watching it descend into chaos, torn between empathy for a child clearly in distress and responsibility to everyone else present. This wasn't about autism anymore. It was about basic safety and respect for a shared space. As the boy upended a tray of clean glasses a server had just brought out, sending them crashing to the floor, I knew I had reached my breaking point. The sound of shattering glass seemed to momentarily suspend time itself, cutting through the chaos like a knife. In that crystalline moment of clarity, I made my decision. 30 years of customer service experience had taught me when a situation was beyond salvaging, and this had crossed that threshold. I stepped directly into the boy's path as he prepared for another destructive lap around my restaurant. "Ma'am," I called firmly, my voice carrying across the now silent dining room. "You need to get your son under control right now, or you will have to leave." Each word was measured, deliberate, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "This behavior is unsafe for everyone, including him." The mother's speech halted mid-sentence, her expression morphing from righteous indignation to outright hostility. She stormed toward me, pointing an accusatory finger so close to my face I could see the chipped red polish on her nail. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you know it's illegal to discriminate against people with disabilities? I could sue you for everything you own. You can't kick us out because my son is autistic. That's a clear violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act." The invocation of the AITAH struck a nerve. As the mother of a child with Down syndrome, I had both benefited from and advocated for disability rights throughout my adult life. But I also understood what the law actually protected: reasonable accommodations, not unlimited license for disruptive or dangerous behavior. "This isn't about your son's autism," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "This is about behavior that's disrupting everyone's meal and creating unsafe conditions. I've asked for reasonable accommodation headphones or silent devices, which you've refused. I want to speak to the owner right now," she demanded, her volume increasing with each word. A deep voice responded from behind me. "You are." Tony had emerged from the kitchen, dish towel still in hand, his normally jovial face set in uncommon seriousness. In our 35 years of marriage, I'd rarely seen him intervene with customers. She usually left the front of house management to me. His presence now signaled the gravity of the situation. Without a word, Tony walked to their table, collected their half-eaten pizza, and efficiently transferred it into a to-go box. He secured the lid with quick, precise movements before holding it out to the woman. "Your meal is on the house," he stated firmly. "But you need to leave our restaurant right now." The bluntness of his directive seemed to stun her. She blinked rapidly, her prepared speech about discrimination momentarily forgotten. "You can't be serious," she finally said, her voice tinged with genuine shock. "You're actually asking us to leave?" "I'm not asking," Tony clarified, placing the to-go box on a nearby table and crossing his arms. "I'm telling you. We welcome everyone in our restaurant, including children with special needs, but we expect appropriate behavior from all our guests." "Appropriate behavior?" she echoed incredulously. "He's a child. Children shouldn't be expected to sit quietly and behave like little adults. The world needs to be more accepting of different ways of being." I stepped forward then, feeling a strange calm descend over me. "I raised a son with Down syndrome," I told her quietly. "He's now 32, works part-time at the library, and has never destroyed a restaurant. Having special needs doesn't mean having no expectations or boundaries." Something flickered in her eye of surprise, perhaps, or the momentary recognition that her assumptions about us might have been wrong. But the vulnerability vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the armor of indignation that seemed to be her default response. "Come on, Jaden," she called to her son, who had finally stopped running and was now crouched beneath a table, rocking slightly. "These people don't want children like you in their restaurant. They're just like all the others." As she gathered their belongings, pointedly ignoring the to-go box Tony had prepared, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the situation was ending, sadness for the boy caught in the middle, and a creeping worry about potential repercussions. Social media could turn this into a nightmare, with one carefully worded post about the heartless restaurant owners who discriminated against an autistic child. But as they finally exited, the woman storming out with dramatic flair, her son trailing behind, the spontaneous applause that erupted from our remaining customers confirmed we had made the right decision, whatever the consequences might be. As the bell above our door jingled with the mother and son's exit, an unexpected wave of applause rippled through the dining room. The tension that had gripped our restaurant for the past half hour visibly dissolved from the faces of our patrons. "Mr. Abernathy" reached for my hand as I passed his table, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. "My wife and I were about to leave, but we've been coming here every Tuesday for 15 years. We shouldn't have to give that up." His words wrapped around my heart like a warm embrace, momentarily soothing the doubt beginning to creep in. The young mother with the infant approached next, bouncing her baby gently on her hip. "I just wanted to say that I work with special needs children," she offered quietly. "What happened here wasn't about autism, it was about a parent who wasn't providing proper support. You did the right thing." Her professional validation felt like permission to breathe again. Tony and I spent the next hour in damage control mode, comping meals, offering complimentary desserts, and personally checking in with each table. Despite our efforts, I noticed 3 parties quietly cancel their orders and leave. The financial impact was immediate and measured: about $200 in lost sales that evening alone. But the potential long-term cost to our reputation weighed more heavily on my mind. Later that night, after we'd closed up and the staff had gone home, I sat at the corner booth with a cup of chamomile tea, my ledger open but forgotten beside me. My thoughts drifted to Marco, now 32 and thriving despite the challenges Down syndrome presented. I remembered the structured routines we established early, the visual schedules we created, the social stories we practiced before entering new environments. Most importantly, I remembered the firm boundaries we maintained, not to restrict him, but to give him the scaffolding he needed to succeed in a world that wouldn't always bend to accommodate his differences. We did everything backward with Marco compared to that mother. I mused aloud as Tony wiped down the espresso machine. When he struggled, we gave him more structure, not less. When he had a meltdown, we saw it as communication, not an excuse. Tony nodded, his movements slowing. "Remember that time at the movie theater when the unexpected fire alarm triggered him? You didn't yell at the theater manager about discrimination, you helped Marco work through his panic, and then we left when it became too much." "Exactly," I said, the memory crystallizing the distinction that had been nagging at me. Accommodation isn't about allowing disruptive behavior. It's about providing the right supports to prevent the disruption in the first place. That mother wasn't accommodating her son's autism. She was using it as a shield to avoid parenting him. My momentary clarity evaporated when I opened my laptop to check our social media before heading home. There it was, already, a scathing 1-star review describing us as heartless ableists who discriminate against neurodivergent children. The post included purposefully emotive language about how we had publicly humiliated a child for simply being autistic and called for a community boycott of our disgustingly intolerant establishment. 3 comments had already appeared beneath it, all expressing outrage from people who clearly hadn't witnessed the actual incident. "This could ruin us," I whispered, showing Tony the screen. In our small town, reputation was everything, and social media had the power to rewrite reality in the court of public opinion. Tony read the review silently, his expression unchanging. When he finished, he simply closed the laptop and looked at me with the same steady gaze that had anchored me through 35 years of marriage. "So be it," he said simply. "If standing up for the safety and comfort of everyone in our restaurant, including that child, who wasn't being given the structure he clearly needed, makes us the villains in someone's story, I can live with that. Can you?" The question hung in the air between us, challenging me to align my actions with my deepest values rather than fear of criticism. I thought about Marco again, about how our consistent boundaries had helped him grow into a man who successfully navigated his world with dignity and respect for others. Yes, I finally answered, surprised by the conviction in my voice. Yes, I can. As we switched off the lights and locked the door behind us, I realized that sometimes the most compassionate act isn't yielding to demands framed as accommodations, but holding firm to standards that ultimately respect everyone's humanity, including a child who deserves more guidance than his mother was willing to provide. 6 months have passed since that challenging evening, and remarkably, our pizzeria is thriving more than ever. The negative review did spark some initial outrage online, but it also prompted our loyal customers to share their own positive experiences, many specifically mentioning how we had respectfully accommodated their children with various needs while maintaining a pleasant environment for everyone. This incident became a turning point in how we approach inclusivity in our restaurant. We've since implemented several changes: sensory-friendly hours on Monday afternoons, a small collection of fidget toys and headphones available for borrowing, and a social story about dining at our restaurant that parents can review with their children beforehand. These simple accommodations have made a significant difference without compromising everyone's dining experience. Last month, a father visited with his daughter who has autism. Before being seated, he quietly requested a quieter table, explaining her sensory sensitivities. We provided appropriate accommodations, and they enjoyed a peaceful meal together. His approach exemplified what was missing in our previous encounter: the understanding that accommodation is collaborative, not demanding the entire environment change, regardless of impact on others. Marco has become our unexpected consultant on these matters. "Mom," he told me with his characteristic directness, "when you gave me rules, it helped me know what to do. Rules make me feel safe." His insight reinforced what I've come to understand more deeply: boundaries aren't barriers to inclusion, but often the essential structures that enable it. Recently, a mother with twin boys on the spectrum visited our restaurant. "I heard this place is good with kids with autism," she said. "Finding places where we're truly welcome and not just tolerated has been challenging." "Everyone is welcome here," I told her sincerely, "as long as they're respectful of everyone else's right to enjoy their meal too." She nodded knowingly. That's exactly what inclusion should be. Watching our dining room tonight filled with diverse patrons all coexisting comfortably, I realized that the incident that once threatened our business actually strengthened it by compelling us to articulate our values more clearly. True compassion isn't about suspending all expectations for certain individuals. It's about creating an environment where different needs are acknowledged within a framework of mutual respect. In our small corner of upstate New York, we're doing our part to demonstrate what balanced inclusion really means. A place where empathy and expectations coexist, creating space for everyone to belong not despite boundaries, but because of them. Sometimes the greatest act of compassion isn't removing all boundaries, but creating the right ones. As a mother who raised a special needs child, I've learned that true inclusion requires mutual respect, not unlimited accommodation at others' expense. If this resonated with you, hit like, share your own experiences in the comments, and subscribe for more honest conversations about life's complicated truths.